Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. I wish you all a healthy and prosperous 2022. Let's kick off the year with exploring the subcontinent of Bulwar. I have no intro, so let's get right into it. Bulwar is a Middle East flavor region, with the Levantine-like Bulwar proper region and the more Arab-themed deserts of Far Bulwar and Far Salahad. It is a region that is geographically separated from Kannor by the mountains of the Bahar, and it's a land fairly isolated from the politics of the main continent of the world of Anbennar. Here, humans and elves are in a fierce struggle against harpies swooping down from the mountains in the north and far east, as well against the infernal dog-headed gnolls that roam the lands to the south and the far west. The Civilized Nations resemble the Diadochi states that formed after the death of Alexander Macedon. Broken successor kingdoms that praise Jaher but relentlessly fight against each other to claim his greatness as their own. The Bahari Mountains are populated by goblins, and the coastal surface hold of Ofdal Tungr holds on to dear life before the onslaught of greedy foes. The humans of Bulwar pray to a single sun god, Surael, a religion that has been shaken again and again by different events. Historically, the humans of Bulwar were subjugated by the monstrous races and subsequently liberated by a fleet of elves that fled the disaster in Elantir. This event had a lasting consequence over the sun cult of the Bulwari. The new sun cult, NSC for short, is the most prominent religion at the start of the game in 1444. While the old sun cult is mostly abandoned, the new sun cult revolves around the so-called sun elves being the chosen people of the god Surael. The Sun Elves are relatively few, but are privileged in the lands following this cult, with some people respectfully turning to them for guidance in spiritual matters, while others worshipping them as literal incarnations of Surael. In the eastern deserts of Far Salahad, a new Sun cult heresy is being spread like wildfire by the horse riders of Jadar Jexizuir, and threatens to engulf the world. The Jadari reject the supremacy of the elves and preach that all races, regardless of monstrosity, lifespan, or height, are blessed by Surael. For this campaign, I have decided to play a new sun cult human nation and eventually form the human empire of Surakes. There are few interesting choices for this purpose, but I chose to start as the Akalat of Azka-Sur. The Suran River is a waterway that flows into the Divenhall Sea through Brasan, feeds Bulwar, and it's the lifeblood of prosperity in the region. Azka-Sur is a Surani human refugee state pushed against the Serpent Spine Mountains by the Salahadi gnolls. The dangers of the starting position are immediately obvious. Though primitive and technologically stunted, the pack of Zoka's 40,000 strong army and beastly generals snuff out the hope of easy expansion. The Jadari and their heresy view Azka-Sur as a hostile rival to their own ambition. Their cavalry armies are formidable in the desert plains and are led by Jadar himself, praised be his name. A little comfort is given by the fact that the Dwarven remnants of Segdir are friendly. They offer moral support, hugs and prayers from behind the gates of the Serpent Spine. Even though they start as an ally, they are equally weak as Azka-Sur and need some time to get their bearings and restore the state of their hold. From an external politics point of view, our insignificance is our strength. We can secure an additional alliance with the Kingdom of Sariyand with little effort and maybe a few smaller acolytes to our west. Zoka's first move is usually to attack Jadar in an epic fight of quality versus quantity. We pray to Surael that Jadar and Zoka, Devourer of Suns, do not directly engage in battle. If any general prevails over the other, the defeated lands are immediately absorbed by the victor, which translates to a game over for us. The desired outcome is for their first war to end in a traditional fashion. The Jadari are very maneuverable, and in my game they have defeated the gnolls, which I would consider the best outcome that you can hope for. Internally, things are not as bleak as they would seem at first glance. 4 provinces are not much and the trade goods are weak, but we start with 2 farmland provinces, one of which is a center of trade. Azka-Sur starts with human administration and army, with the autocracy government and a mediocre ruler. The Azka-Surian ideas have a mix of decent military and religious bonuses, with a sprinkle of trading on top. The heretic conversion power in the traditions aid in fighting the spread of the Jad, but lose much relevance after that. The morale, defensiveness and prestige bonuses are very helpful in the early game though, and the war score bonus versus other religions is very nice in a vacuum, but the high amount of new sun cult nations make it less impactful in the mid game. I really enjoyed the flavor of the Lords of Azka-Sur using elephants for parading, even though incorporating them in the army is not possible due to the rarity of the ivory resource until very late in the game. The mage estate is not available, and the clergy estate starts with a malus in the form of the independent clergy privilege. This privilege handicaps the clergy estate and can only be removed under certain very specific conditions. It has some unpleasant consequences when removed, but lowering our chosen role to the minimum of 1 will alleviate these consequences. This brings us to the spice in the internal politics soup, the religion. The New Sun cult has been vastly improved in the Light and Dark update and has a lot of flavor. As base bonuses, the New Sun cult grants a solid -2 national unrest and some morale recovery speed. This religion allows claiming the Defender of the Faith title, which is nice. What is nicer is the Holy Order mechanic that allows you to establish Holy Orders in fully cored states. These Holy Orders can be established from the State tab by paying some mana. Once established, they give a free development point for each of the provinces in the state and another permanent modifier. These Holy Orders cannot be changed, but the bonuses are great and totally worth the establishment cost. The main reason you should be excited to play with the New Sun cult though is the incidence system, similar to the vanilla Shinto one but greatly expanded upon, and with much bigger effects on the game world. The Bulwari kingdoms with Elven administration straight up start with an active incident, but as a human nation we have one less thing to worry about. The incidents fire if certain specific conditions are met, and will require reaction from the NSC countries, will have different constant effects, present different challenges, and reward many different temporary and permanent country modifiers during and at the end of each incident. During the incidents, there will be multiple events that will demand decisions that can modify the chosen role level. The chosen role is a mechanic that reflects the role of the elves in the New Sun cult countries. The higher levels represent elves as the supreme race in the state and limits the social mobility of the humans, which must worship and serve the elven incarnations of Surael. The lower levels give elves the role of wise counselors and monks, separating them from earthly dealings and allowing humans to participate in the administrative and political life. Mechanically, the higher chosen levels will increase tolerance of the true faith while making advisors more expensive and vice versa, with a small added extra bonus unique to each level. Azka-Sur starts with the chosen role at level 2, and for getting rid of the independent clergy estate privilege in a more painless fashion, we have to reduce the chosen role to 1. But aside from that, there are no strict requirements for the chosen level during this mission tree. One of the incidents, the teachings of Sal Fazil, did not fire during my playthrough. The most impactful and fun incidents were the Masquerade and the Silence of the Grave ones, about which I will talk later. The other were pretty much inconsequential for us in particular. The Azka-Surian mission tree is nice and meaty. A lot of missions, most of which aid in the conquest of the continent. One of the main themes of the mission tree is the building of grand temples in the conquered lands. There is the Azka-Sur temple, which will grant +1 tolerance of the true faith, the Eduz Vasin temple for some extra prestige, the face of Surael in the Jodari capital of Ebuubtu for extra missionary, and the southern temple of Tasmatush for extra missionary strength. In the early game, while we observe the happenings around us, the Dwarven relation branch requires us to maintain good relations with our Dwarven ally. Completing this branch is very much worth it and requires us to make sure that we aid Segdir in its survival and expansion. They help us by building a fort basically for free in the capital and upgrade our trade infrastructure. The final reward from this branch, the Sun Diadem, translates to a permanent +10 maximum absolutism. The mission requirements can only be fulfilled in the mid-game, so it is wise to maintain the alliance and aid Segdir in protecting their capital from goblins, orcs, and other dangers from the depths of the Serpent Spine. My only issue was that they never built a castle in their capital in the whole campaign, meaning that I was blindsided at times by the fact that the war enemies would simply stroll through the Dwarven lands and emerge on top of my capital when least expected. There is a slight coffee theme that ends in another permanent production and splendor bonus, which is very nice to get before the Age of Witch Kings. A mid to late game branch encourages expansion into Rahen and developing elephant cavalry, which adds some neat flavor and a potential 25% cavalry combat bonus. But flavor trumps mechanics in this case because ivory is so scarce and difficult to develop that the effort to get this bonus is not worth it until very late in the campaign. The final reward of the Rahen branch is a permanent yet small morale and military tradition bonus. but it practically requires the complete conquest of the Raj and its minions. Finally, the small architectural branch is also quite enjoyable and gives a bit of taste of the later Surakes mission tree expansion. Starting this branch allows us to choose an architectural style. From the 3 options, I chose the human style for extra construction cost and speed. Later, the infrastructure of the province of Sardazar is expanded with a beautiful garden and ultimately an audience hall that grants a permanent +1 monarch diplomatic skill bonus to future leaders. In my campaign, I was lucky enough that Jadar and Zoka did not fight head to head. Jadar won the war but was left weakened by the conflict, so I pounced on the opportunity while he was isolated diplomatically. I beelined for the capital, avoided their armies, and took as much land as I could. Hashir was released from Zoka by force, so I conquered them too, sneak grabbing a lot of pretty good land before Zoka attacked me. With my forces bolstered by my allies' troops, I was able to push Zoka back and take some land in the desert. Shortly after, Telarios, leader of Irliam, died, initiating the first incident. This incident is fairly innocent. It sparks a series of debates where we are tasked to give our opinions on the future of the New Sun cult and what it cares about. An assassination attempt on my ruler's life failed, and my Akal was wounded but recovered soon after. As Jadar remained without serious competition in the region, I had to attack them again to curtail their strength before they would get too powerful. I used the same strategy of beelining for their capital and avoiding their armies, letting them waste time sieging my forts while I took as much land as I could, including Ebubtu. Jadar would not be a threat anymore from now on. I chose to pick the incident reward that grants a clergy estate privilege, which increases loyalty and tolerance of the true faith in exchange for the price of only 10% tax penalty. After the final debate, my stances resulted in a temporary missionary strength bonus. Before tensions in Bulwar rose too high and all hell would break loose with the Samartal masquerade incident, I managed to declare war on Tlukt and enlist the aid of my allies Segdir, Irliam and Varamhar to secure as much beastman land as I could, including the fortress town of Ekruzagnu. I don't think I could have managed fighting the Nolish armies alone, so it had to be done as soon as possible. During the build-up to the masquerade, many events will destroy trust between all the New Sun cult states in Bulwar and increase tensions. This will result in some broken alliances in the region. Once the tensions rise sufficiently, the incident will fire and declaring war against another New Sun cult nation will not be allowed. A great banquet will be organized to reduce tensions and all the nations will send delegates. You may choose to send a leader, an heir or a consort if available. All is well until an explosion occurs and everyone attending is wounded or killed. This completely breaks trust between the countries and a general investigation is launched to find out who was the perpetrator. Everyone blames each other and to advance the investigation, anyone can send a diplomat to any other NSC country. An investigation action will invariably lead to war. These wars are special in the sense in which they are 1 versus 1 wars, meaning that any allies of the warring parties cannot participate. This is great if you're in a solid position and want to attack a strong neighbor with other fairly strong allies. In a peace deal, you are able to take lands vassalized, and there is an extra peace deal that can be used to further the investigation itself. Our position was not as solid, and I had to fight a brutal war against Sariand with a force less than half their size, battered from constant expansion and war with the Knolls. Even though we covered a good portion of the land, the provinces themselves are mostly poor and tough to develop, have their own culture and religion, so our position is fragile. We simply took enough war score to be able to secure a wide peace, as they would have won on the long run. A bunch of small acolytes also decided to investigate us, which made the problem a bit worse, but not by much. Elisna also jumped into the fray. Elisna's fleet made it impossible to reach their capital and secure a real victory, so we ended that one quickly as well, without claiming any spoils. I would then try and take advantage of the chaos in the east to slowly conquer all of Far Salahad and convert it. Once truces are over, I would pounce on the isolated western kingdoms and take as much land as I could while going through the mission tree. Keterata became a larger and larger threat, as they and the Knolls split Elisna between themselves. Do not ignore them. If you can secure an alliance with the Ket, then all the better. I also managed to liberate and release Verkal Gulan in the east. Now, for full disclosure, Keterata did attack me and I had to just force a peace through console commands. It's just for full disclosure of this campaign. Otherwise the run would have been completely ruined, and I chose to do that. The Jaharian Exemplar incident fired, but I mostly ignored it due to the fact that I had no hope of colonizing anything, and therefore I couldn't care less about the Jaharian expedition's fortunes in Elentir. In the west I expanded with the aim of taking all the provinces needed to form Surakes. Once all was done, I pressed the button and voila, Surakes was born. It so happened that at the time I selected the formed Surakes decision, the Silent as a Grave incident fired. This fires if the year is at least 1600 and you control the general area around the Harra oasis in the far Bulwar. This incident was my favorite. What happens is an ancient dead king wakes up and a series of crises occur. You need a strong army ready and you need to react fast. The crisis events include, but are not limited to, elemental spawning, a horde of basilisk-like monsters. You will be tasked to throw weapons into the Suran River and explore some ruins in search of some relics that you can use to fight the rising king. Each crisis will increase the king's power by adding troops to the ones that spawn when he is summoned. Once the relics are gathered and the king is vulnerable, you can send all your armies to Ergulagnu and summon him. His armies, just like the monsters that spawn during the crises, have enormous morale and must be completely destroyed. Failing to defeat the king, or if the time runs out, which is announced by an event shortly before this, you will lose stability and a bunch of development. But defeating him, you can choose between 3 permanent modifier rewards, of which I chose the absolutism bonus. If you summon the king after gathering the 5 relics, you may also get to keep them at the end of the incident. These relics can be used via decision and mostly have a one-time use and are very powerful. One relic, for example, will win a siege instantly. Another will kill the ruler of a country for the price of an heir consort of your choice. One will empower your capital state shortly for an almost instant construction time, and so on. You can theoretically summon and defeat the king at any point he is vulnerable, but if you don't do it before collecting the relics, you do not get to keep them as an additional reward. His maximum power is represented by an army of 150 units. I had to summon some emergency mercenaries to help in the fight, but in the end, the dead king was felled and order was restored. Back to our main event. The founding of Surakes will grant permanent claims on the totality of the continent of Bulwar and unlock new ideas and missions. I can't put my finger on the theme of their ideas, but they have many good bonuses and I decided to switch. They have a whopping 20% development cost reduction, 2.5% reduced mana costs, trade and military bonuses in the form of infantry combat ability, manpower, morale and fire damage dealt, with a pinch of galley combat ability as well as 2 points of unrest reduction. Their mission tree is an extension to the previous one, so there is no pressure to finish the Azka-Sur missions before switching to Surakes. You're essentially playing the previous country but with new ideas if you choose to switch them. First step on our journey is to conquer and core all of the Bulwari culture group provinces, which roughly translates to complete the conquest of the continent of Bulwar. Once that is complete, an event will fire in order to select a new capital. Select Sarayand if it has the Ash Palace modifier for some extra bonuses to ruler admin power and prestige. This modifier exists if the eponymous nation has completed the respective mission before the province was conquered. I had no idea that the province of Sarayand had a bonus like that, which required it to be a capital, so I placed mine in Akatbar, so that my capital was in a solid province located in the end node of the subcontinent. The following missions work together to create a country suited to the men and women of Surakes. The 2 branches look to the past and present to gather lessons that can be applied. On the present side, you get a civil registry for extra development cost in human lands. Building sufficient universities will grant a decision to professionalize the state, which grants another bonus from a plethora of available choices which affect many aspects of the country. I chose siege ability of the Dat tax. You standardize the language and usher a golden age of innovation and an anthem too. The anthem I chose was Praise the Sun for even more army morale. On the past side, you must remove the elven kingdoms from the map and achieve 100% religious unity in order to desacralize the sun cult and empower the humans so that they can achieve their true potential. You get to explore the past by sending archaeologists to study the ruins of ancient Bulwar, yet for another bonus of your choice. These ones are hidden away by events. I chose to learn from the god kings of Bulwar. You may select a national hero. I chose Telarius for the extra tolerance of the true faith. Once all the nation building is done, you may declare the birth of Surakeshi nationalism. This will further lower unrest in Bulwari provinces and grant a very small local production bonus. Once the national spirit is born, you may choose to deal with the monstrous cultures by accepting them as Bulwari or removing them completely. The Garden of Surakesh will grant the Blessed Land modifier to all the provinces on the Suran River and unlock the final leg of the mission tree. This modifier will grant a chance for extra development points to be added to a province when being manually developed. This gives you a very powerful tool to develop the Paradise Garden lands very efficiently, and if you want to play tall, this is a very good tool. From here, you open 3 sub-branches. One branch develops the military, which grant permanent defensiveness bonuses to the borders of Bulwar and temporary combat bonuses to your fleets and armies. The second branch focuses on development of Paradise Gardens in the cities of Bulwar, in the plains, the desert, and mountains. The third branch focuses on developing trade on the land and in the Divenhall Sea, with a permanent bonus for the province of Brasan, which will make the Surakeshi traders and the state supremely rich. The final mission rewards another permanent modifier, creating an earthly paradise for all the citizens to enjoy. It's a very modest bonus that I will let you discover on your own if you choose to play Surakesh yourself. For idea groups, I chose to start with the ones that reinforced my national ideas. Therefore, I started with defensive as the first group, then picked religious as the second one and trade the third. I think I should have started with quantity instead of defensive because I realized too late that my army force limit was simply too small. Religious is very good for converting the Jad, the Raheni and the Kets, but most of the campaign I was fighting in Bulwar and felt less impactful because of the new sun cult is the most common religion there. I expelled the monstrous nations, so there was no need to spend any effort on converting them, and to fulfill 100% religious unity missions, tolerance ideas is the way to go in my opinion. Even with my powerful missionaries, I could still not keep up conversion with the rate of conquest in Rahen at the time I founded Surakesh. Was it an interesting campaign? Definitely, but I have to admit that it was less exciting in comparison to other ones. I started as Azka-Sur for the challenge of the difficult start, and it was surely there. It's very fun to start very small and succeed in EU4, and you get some of that with this nation. The problem was the power fantasy had no closure in my case. I never ended up feeling like I have achieved peak performance, not even after conquering the whole of Bulwar. Fighting the final boss, the command, kept being difficult even through the 4th war. I blame this on my idea groups. Too much morale and too little discipline. The mission tree is decent, but aside from the Segdir related missions, it's not very innovative. It's mostly about conquest and conversion, so it ends up being relatively bland. Creating a country in the way that Surakesh is created is a neat concept. Playing Surakesh was different than other fleshed out countries. If you don't read someone else's story, you make your own. But I did experience a feeling of being slightly underwhelmed with the options at hand. Not saying that everything should be overpowered, but it would have been neat to be able to customize in more creative ways than simply extra minor modifiers. Things like having the choice to create a seafaring culture and getting Marines force limit, for example, or other special units. Things like making the Bulwari cultures work as a subterranean race, so that the gardens of Surakesh could be spread to the Dwarven holds and such things. I don't know if these things are technically feasible, these are just some random thoughts, but comparing the Surakesh modifiers with the rewards from the Silence of the Grave incident, for example, felt like playing as the new Sun cult religion was more fun than playing Azka-Sur into Surakesh. Ultimately, Surakesh is not a playthrough in its own, but simply an addition to the original country. You get the tools to switch to a tall playthrough in the mid-game if you choose to do so. Bottom line is, if Azka-Sur is not interesting to play, Surakes won't add much. I hear that Reuyel is the country for this, so I will give that one a try one day and see how that goes. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope this helped shine some of Surael's light on the region, and see you in the next one with something more exciting. Happy New Year!